Hey everybody, how's it going? So I am here with Aaron Lowe. He is from Autocare. Autocare had a lot to do with getting the right to repair bill passed, and he's also a really hardcore advocate for right to repair when it comes to automotive. So I wanted to have him on just to answer some questions and raise awareness of this issue, since more and more car manufacturers have been trying to push back against the right to repair in the automotive space. A lot of people I don't think are really aware of where the future is headed if this trend continues. So, Aaron, thank you so much for taking the time. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Okay, so the first question that I would have is, can you just kind of explain what the 2012 and 2020 automotive right to repair bills, what problems were they seeking to solve, and how is automotive repair different now than it would have been if these two did not pass?
Sure. Well, what was going on was that information tools, software that the independent repair shops needed to repair, maintain late model vehicles, computer controlled vehicles, was becoming more difficult, expensive, and sometimes impossible to get. So we started working on right to repair back in, really it was 2001, and the manufacturers strongly opposed it. And it wasn't until we moved to the state of Massachusetts, where a very consumer-oriented, very pro-consumer state, we started making headway. And we had a ballot question on the 2012 ballot in Massachusetts that said that any information tool software that the manufacturers make available to their franchise dealers, they needed to make available to the independent aftermarket. And then it actually said that the car companies had to maintain, starting in model year 2018, a cloud with all of their diagnostic and repair software that you could download onto a laptop and be able to maintain or be able to diagnose and repair a vehicle using a standardized interface. So that really changed the dynamics, because now independents had access to the same information, the proprietary tools, the software that the dealer had to repair the car, and they could compete on a much more level playing field with the dealer. So huge change in the dynamics, and suddenly now independents didn't have to turn cars away and send them back to the dealerships, or even bring the cars to the dealerships themselves to get some of the repairs completed. So it was a big plus for the aftermarket and for consumers too. The problem is that technology is advancing and is changing rapidly, as we all know. And what we're seeing now is that a lot more of the data is being transmitted wirelessly from the car to the manufacturer. Also, we're seeing the car companies starting to put firewalls around their vehicle systems, and then forcing the independents or anybody repairing a car to go through an authorization system through the manufacturer. So each manufacturer is going through their own proprietary authorization system. So this is creating still yet another barrier to repairs. And so what we did is we pushed legislation in the state that would say, if you own a car, you should be able to have that data, the repair data on your car, just the repair data. You should have access to it, and you should have the ability to forward that data to the repair shop of your choice. And you need to do this in a secure manner, but you should be able to have control and access to the data your car is producing. And then it said, if you needed to put a firewall around the vehicle, you need to do it in a standardized way, so that every manufacturer is not requiring a different system for access to their vehicle diagnostic systems. And the car company shouldn't be controlling it. It should be controlled independently of the manufacturer. So that was on the ballot in 2020, and it passed 75 to 25%. Car owners were strongly in favor of having control of their data and having access to a competitive repair market, which they said back in 2012 as well. So the customers, the car manufacturers' customers have spoken. They want control of their data. They want to have available competition in the repair industry. So guess what? The manufacturers, instead of listening to their customers, have decided the best way to fight this is to go to court. So they filed a legal action, I believe, just around Thanksgiving of this year. And that court case is now heading toward, hopefully, a resolution in the next several weeks. We're not really certain when the date will be resolved, but the trial was held on June 14th, and there continues to be discussions. But we're hopeful that the trial will be resolved sometime by the end of July.
Okay, so just try to break that down a little bit. I have a lot of
A
questions
lot of
for you.
talk.
So the first
Yeah.
thing is a lot of people are at so. I'm sure you're aware of the commercials that were presented against right to repair for automotive last year.
Oh yeah.
My personal favorite is there's a commercial with scary music and a woman talking like this, and she's walking through a parking lot, and she's walking to her car, and somebody's following behind her, and then like a and then and the implication in this video, and they're talking about sexual assault statistics, and they're implying that you are going to be raped or sexually assaulted in a parking lot if this passes, because a stalker is going to get access to everything inside your car, be able to stalk you to the parking lot, and then either rape and kill you. Now, one of my coworkers who's a mechanic was saying that if your car has OnStar on it, if you have an abusive husband and he has OnStar, he could not only could he track your car, he could remotely disable your car if he wanted to. But one of the main questions that was coming up from a lot of people is A, why is my car storing this information on me? Uh, B, like, so pretty much, what is my car storing, and why does it need to store this information? And also, what specifically, what type of information? Why do repair shops need access to any of that information inside the car to fix it?
Well, those are great questions, and thankfully the citizens of Massachusetts saw through those ads and realized they were scare tactics. And the bill is very limited in wording to mechanical information. So obviously, we're not talking about access to personal data and location information, which you don't need to repair a car. But why the manufacturers? I mean, they have access to a huge amount of data from a vehicle. I mean, there are sensors in virtually every aspect of a car, whether it's even in your seat, because they have sensors for airbags. So because you don't want your airbag inflating too much if you're at a certain weight, so it inflates based on the weight of the passenger, which is a really good safety function. But it also allows the manufacturer to track a lot of data on individuals, and they probably accept different data, want different data for different reasons. But the key to us is most car owners aren't even aware that their data is being taken from the vehicle and being stored. And in some cases, that data is being used by other parties, third parties. So, there's just very little information the consumer has on all these things. And so, what we were trying to do through the bill is number one, make sure the consumer knows that their data is being accessed. And two, make sure that they can control at least their mechanical data so that they can still have choices. Where we're headed in the future is that the onboard diagnostic device may, one day be history. First of all, because they can get all this data wirelessly, they don't need the OBD port anymore to gain that data. Now, it's required by federal law, but it's only required for emissions-related data, not anything else. So if the manufacturers were to restrict access to the brakes, to everything else from that OBD system, they could legally do that. And therefore, the only way we'd have access to it is to go through the manufacturer. Number two, electric vehicles, which everybody's talking about now, and whether you believe it's going to be tomorrow or sometime in the future, electric vehicles are going to be a bigger part of the future. They don't have OBD systems. They don't have that same access to the OBD data. In fact, Tesla makes very little, if anything, available to independents to repair their vehicles. So we're, without access to this data through the telematics system, we're going to be out, the independent will be left on the outside and be dependent on the manufacturer, who is also one of their biggest competitors to obtain data. So all we're trying to do, we're not trying to gain any preference. We just want a level playing field so that we can continue to compete for consumers, and consumers continue to have choices and simply control over the repair experience.
Okay, so from what I understand, you still technically have to have an OBD port. However, it's only required to that port give you access to emissions data, whereas the rest of the
Correct.
diagnostic information for the vehicle, that is something they could move to wireless. And without this bill, they could just say, okay, we're going to move all vehicle diagnostics to wireless. You don't have access to wireless because the old bill excludes wireless, and you're screwed. Now, one of the things that I don't think a lot of people understand, many people understand that Tesla is a fairly anti-right to repair company when it comes to repairing their cars. But one thing that really shocks most people that I speak to is when I point out, by the way, Toyota, Ford, Honda, Nissan, and General Motors, which makes Chevy, GNC, and all the others, all donated millions of dollars to this fear campaign, trying to get people to believe that if this legislation is passed, that you will have your home broken into and be raped in a parking lot. What car brands, if any, exist, are pro right to repair, and would you say fully support everything that you advocate for, if any? Does that exist?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard for me to. Almost all the manufacturers are opposing the right to repair the 2020 ballot question. As far as I know, every one of them opposed it. I'm not aware of any that supported it. There are some manufacturers that do a better job than others of working with the independent aftermarket to make sure they have tools and information. But it's when it comes to access to wireless data and continuing to make sure there's a level playing field in that area. As far as we know, none of them were supporting it. It was complete opposition. Now, they spent 25 million plus to oppose it. I mean, yeah, we had to spend a lot of money to try to fight it for it, but it was difficult to keep pace with the money they were spending to oppose this ballot question. Fortunately for us, they, I think, underestimated the intelligence level of consumers in how they addressed it. But it was still a tough battle, an intense battle, and I think consumers spoke, and they want choice, and I think it's imperative that the manufacturers listen to what their customers are telling them, and that is they like to be able to get their cars repaired where they want, and they want to have control of their data. So we're this has been a long-term battle, and we're in it for the long term, but it's been a tough battle against some very well-funded adversaries.
Okay, so just to be clear, so if someone wants to give their money to a company that is pro right to repair in the automotive space, when it comes to making sure that diagnostics are available into the future, there's no way for them to vote with their dollar and say, I'm buying from this pro right to repair car company. Because I want to make sure that I'm not
Yeah, I mean,
twisting what you're
like I
saying.
said, there are some manufacturers, that have been doing a better job of making sure their websites are accessible, and that they're available, and that there's diagnostic software available. The problem is that we started back in 2014, 2015 to talk to the manufacturers about this wireless data issue, and none of them really wanted to come to the table to address the issue. And this is why we're at the place we're at. We really wanted to work out an agreement with them so that data would be provided to the independent aftermarket wirelessly, because we saw where this was going. And yet we couldn't get any interest to do that. And so it's very frustrating, because we think this is something that's in the best interest of everybody. Because if data is available, and people can develop innovative solutions and innovative services for car owners, they're going to want those cars, because those are the cars that they have the most choices and the ease of repair and convenience. So we think this is a win-win for everybody, and we still don't totally understand why there's a real reluctance to try to work this issue out and try to get consumers back in the driver's seat when it comes to their own data.
If you were to try to steelman the opposition's arguments that there are any sort of serious data security issues with any of these bills, are there any of the points that they've made where you could say, I kind of understand it, or is this just purely all made up fear mongering garbage?
Well, we were really careful when we were drafting this. We really did not intend, and nobody, and I don't think the bill, the law says this, is to make sure that this data is securely available. The bill does not open up the vehicles to anybody to get in and hack any system. It's very specific that it's just access to the data coming off the system. The car companies themselves build gateways to allow the data to be shared with them, and then provide firewall protection on their vehicles. There's no reason they can't provide the same access to the independent aftermarket. This whole interpretation that suddenly all the vehicles are going to be opened up and they'll be hacking. Well, yeah, the vehicles are transmitting data, so this issue is already out there. They've created it, but this bill will do nothing to change that. The bill, what it does is says secure access to data, so that car owners who want access to their data can get access to it. It doesn't open up the internal vehicle systems to hacking. It doesn't. The car companies can comply with the requirements of this law and still protect their vehicles from unwanted access. So this is something they should be doing anyway. we think that car companies should be building secure systems. Because I don't want to be driving a car that's open to hacking. I want a car that's secure, but I also want to be able to control my data. So they can do both, and they're doing it now for themselves. They need to be able to do it for the consumers.
Would you, this is kind of a difficult one. Do you think that third parties should have access to the code required to fix and test Bluetooth hubs attached to autonomous class 3 or 4 self-driving cars?
I think the autonomous vehicle, certainly there are autonomous features on vehicles today, and there needs to be a lot of work done to make sure that, everybody, including the dealerships and everybody within the system, can repair those vehicles properly. We take the position that there are a lot there independents and dealers. There are a lot of well trained and there are technicians out there, and they just need to be educated. Everybody needs to be educated, and there needs to be a system put in place to make sure this can be done safely. I think independents can do it. I think anybody who people. I trust a lot of the shops that we have to be able to do this work, and I think this misnomer that you can only go to an authorized shop to get good repair is does not mesh with the reality of the situation. The reality of the situation, there are a lot of well trained technicians that can do this. I think the jury's still out on fully autonomous vehicles and how that's going to work and who's going to repair them and how you know whether when we're going to see those vehicles. It's still, I think, a ways down the road before we'll see fully autonomous vehicles fully on the road. So I think that's something we need to continue to watch. I think electric vehicles, there's still going to need to be a lot of training for all technicians. I'm working on those cars. But the question should be, let's make sure that people who want the training can get it and that the information, the tools are there and software, because the best thing that anybody can do is make sure the resources are out there to get these cars repaired properly and safely.
What can the average consumer do if they're not able to vote with their wallet and give their money to a car manufacturer that's fully on board with all of this? What's the next best thing that the average everyday consumer can do to help support what it is you guys are
They
advocating
sh-
for?
they need to let their legislator know that they want to be able to continue to get their cars repaired where they want, and they want access to their data. We are looking at a federal effort in the not too distant future, very soon, and because we think we're going to need to move the Massachusetts effort nationwide. So letting their legislator know that this is an issue to them and they're concerned about it, and we want to make sure that we have the right to repair is key. I think the whole you know it's changing up there right in Washington right now. We've already heard the president just the other day talk about right to repair as being important. The FTC has put out a nixing the fix report that really indicated a lot of the issues that are being faced by independent repair industry in trying to repair both everything from phones to vehicles. So the government's starting to take an interest in this. The federal government is really starting to take an interest, and consumers need to make their voices heard to legislators that it's got to change. We need to be able to have competition in the repair industry. Computers, technology are great. It can make it, can do a lot of really great things. But if we're going to lock those vehicles or lock other, devices, then a lot of those benefits are not going to be as great. So that's probably what I would say is the best thing they can do right now.
So if there's not specific federal legislation that's been introduced, is there anything that they should point to and say, "Hey, this bill was passed in Massachusetts. This ballot initiative was passed here. I'd like something in my own state."
Yeah, I think letting their state legislator know is not a bad idea. I think you know there's already been state right to repair efforts for devices and things like that. There hasn't been one similar to Massachusetts in other states, but that doesn't mean there won't be. And that's certainly something that we're looking at to make sure to try to move this effort forward. So we're committed to looking at the federal side, and also looking at other states.
Now, you guys seemed particularly lucky in that none of the opposition arguments really seemed to land. Were there any pieces of misinformation or arguments that do land that you would want to clarify now? Because the whole, you're going to be sexually assaulted in a parking lot, it was clear that didn't work. But are there any opposition arguments that really do land with consumers that you'd want a chance to be able to respond to and just go over?
Well, I mean, I think what I brought up before, the main issue that I think they brought up this, stalking issue, which was clearly not what the bill did. But the cybersecurity issue is something that, we take very seriously because we think if we're going to do this, it needs to be done cybersecurely and needs to be protected. So it can be done cybersecurely. There's been demonstrations. A lot, groups have been working very hard to develop international standards for data being transmitted securely. So it can be done. It can be done cybersecurely. Don't buy this argument that the car company owning or controlling all the data is going to be, the best protection for their data. This is not the way to go. Meeting standards, developing reasonable ways that data can be shared and protected is really the better direction and will ensure better protection for their data. Just saying that all my data is going to be in the cloud protected by the manufacturer does not give me a warm feeling at night. Let's put it that way.
Now, you have data within the car that tells you, it was this error on this component at this time and things of that nature. What else do people probably aren't fully aware of? What other type of data is being stored in their vehicle that really has nothing to do with, the engine is overheating?
Yeah, I mean, GPS data, where your location. I told you it could probably measure your weight on the seat. There are ways of how you're driving. Your driving habits could also be measured by the data that comes off the vehicle. There's a lot of virtually everything you do with your car is can be measured through the sensors in that car. There's just so many modules on a car right now, and they virtually every aspect of that car is controlled by a computer module.
I would personally be very concerned that that data, instead of it just being monitored in real time for something else, is being transmitted to the point where they know when someone is or isn't sitting in my car. That's a lot
Yeah.
more creepy to me than the concept of the mechanic that I ask can get a diagnostic code is you know when I'm sitting in my car, you know when I'm opening my glove box and you're logging all of that. That's just
Yeah, you just
really
don't know too. I mean, most people have no idea that their vehicle is really, has the ability. Now, I don't know. We don't know what they do with the data or what's monitored and what's not monitored in the data. My point is that it's all there. And so it's all accessible to the manufacturer. If they are, we don't know. And that's one of the things that we keep bringing up is that we don't know what is going on with all this data. And so that's something, a certain amount of transparency, I think, is healthy. And, I think we were trying to get to that with the Massachusetts bill. It does require a disclosure when you buy a car of what data is being taken and used for as part of that law in Massachusetts. And that actually was not part of the car company challenge, as far as I know. So I don't know if the Attorney General of Massachusetts maybe promulgate those requirements once the court case is over.
now there is this lawsuit that was filed on around June 21st from the Alliance for Automotive Innovation. Are there any other roadblocks that you're facing right now besides this?
Actually, that was I think it was November 21st when it was filed.
Oh, was it?
And it's in court now. We're not aware of any other. Once this lawsuit is settled, I guess we'll be able to determine what the next steps are going to be. It would depend on how the judge rules. So we're kind of waiting to see where that goes in the next couple of weeks, and then we'll know more about what the next steps are. Certainly, I believe the manufacturer, whoever, there could be an appeal if the judge were to overturn the lawsuit, the manufacturer's lawsuit, then there could be an appeal. That's probably likely. So that could delay it longer. So we'll have to see how this just progresses over the next several weeks.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time. I really do appreciate it.
No, my pleasure. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it, and hopefully we'll get this right to repair bill continuing to move forward, and we'll be able to make sure consumers have the right to get their cars repaired.
All right. Yeah, you have a good day.
You too. Thanks, man.
Bye.